So now for something almost completely different, meteorites. So I apologize to the meteorite experts in the audience for some recap going on here. It's almost 20 years ago now that we had the fall of two very strange meteorites. They're ordinary chondrites, actually the most ordinary of meteorites that fell. And they're samples from probably an S-class asteroid, and they're from the very surface of that asteroid, a regolith breccias, which means they were accumulating things from other asteroids. In this case, they're accumulating samples of halite, which is very unusual. And it's sedimentary halite, and it was dated by 3 different techniques to be about 4.5 billion years old, which is pretty old, about as old as meteorites get. And these halites, as all halites do, include aqueous fluid inclusions, both primary and secondary aqueous fluid inclusions, found by me and my office mate from grad school, as a matter of fact. And you can see liquid in these, and a vapor bubble as well, which you can see moving in this movie here. So there's actually liquid water here inside these fluid inclusions, and the bubble is actually a vacuum bubble, by the way. That's pretty cool. These are early solar system fluids, about as early as it can get. Actual samples of water from someplace. And by doing heating freezing experiments, we could conclude that these were trapped at room temperature. So you're talking about some body in the early solar system which had liquid water 4.5 billion years ago at brines. And the fact that there are still fluid inclusions in these halite grains means they haven't been heated in the last 4.5 billion years, which is unusual for meteorites. This is a really rare thing. So why are fluid inclusions interesting? Well, it's obvious to this crowd why they are. If you could measure the isotopes of the water, you could reveal something about the early history of the solar system water. And it took about 15 years for techniques to develop until we could do this. We can provide, hopefully, key information about comet and asteroid aqueous evolution. Maybe something about the origin of water on the inner planets and some of these ocean-bearing worlds. And maybe also learn something about life-supporting environments elsewhere in the early solar system. So, like I said, 15 years later, techniques finally were developed where you can measure the hydrogen and oxygen isotopes of these fluids. So these are the results of analyses of individual fluid inclusions from the halite. O17 here, and then this is delta D, deuterium. So hydrogen isotopes, oxygen isotopes here. The bars here, these are now, so solar system water would be right about here. Terrestrial water is right here, okay, 0, 0. This field here is a field of water from phyllosilicates measured in carbonaceous chondrite meteorites, and water from phyllosilicates in a few ordinary chondrites, and then water from the coma of a few comets. And what you see is the analyses of these guys, these are the fluid inclusions from these halites, span the entire range from sea chondrites up towards cometary water. So you could view it as being a mixture of mixing lines between cometary and ordinary chondrite water, inner and outer solar system water, or something else. We don't really know. These are really difficult analyses to make, and no one's duplicated this in the last 10 years. They will. So the cool thing is that in addition to having water in these halites, you also have lots and lots of small solid inclusions, which you're analyzing. And the cool thing about this is that most of the inclusions are abundant organics. So organics are the most common things we're finding in these halite grains. So by Raman, you can do some analyses, and this one here contains, for example, macromolecular carbon, pyroxene, and olivine. And this little grain right here, this is a little blow up showing the Raman mapping, and the colors indicate where the different species are. You can also dissolve a halite grain as we did and pull out the solid inclusions, which we did in a cleaning room. And there's dozens of little grains here, up to several hundred microns in size. And these are really cool to look at. It's taking a long time to do that. For instance, there are diamonds in here. This diamond grain, the diamond is the blue grains here, little nano diamonds. They're associated with graphitic macromolecular carbon and carbonates. This is kind of queer. This is definitely diamond by... They're a little bit larger than nano diamonds. They're between uralite diamonds and pre-solar diamonds in size. So they're very small, not quite nano diamonds. They could be pre-solar, we just don't know. Associated with carbonate, that's kind of weird. Definitely diamond, this is the Raman spectra. It's definitely these different little diamond grains, not something else. We see lots of aliphatic compounds. I'm not an organic chemist. I'm going to blow through this. I just want you to know that these samples are available for analysis, and it's happening at a very slow rate because they're really tiny. But there's lots of them. We found methyl chloride. So there's a grain there's an organic grain sitting in the halite. Apparently, you had methane diffusing out of the organics and combining with chlorine from the sodium chloride to make methyl chloride. It's like in drinking birds, right? Anyway, that's cool because you see methane, and as you saw yesterday, you see methane as one of the materials coming out of geysers in these ocean worlds. And we've gone on to doing carbonzanes and FTIR of these grains. These are two of these grains that were moved from the halite. We've fibbed, and now we're doing TEM as well as carbonzanes, Raman, and FTIR on these to see. And there's quite a wide range of organics, even in a single little, several micron sized grain. Again, you see phyllosilicates, which is what you'd expect to see from the interaction of solids and water. This is a summary of what we've seen in these little solids in a single halite grain. It's a pretty wide range of stuff. It's amazing. So it's definitely, as I said, this is not from the H-chondrite asteroid. This is from somewhere else. These little grains, these are basically samples of the erupting body. So as the water was erupting out of this, wherever this world was, it was entraining bits of grains from the solid material at the base of the ocean, or the body of water. So these are samples of both proto-material and also alter-material from an ocean world, essentially. So now Queenie, my postdoc, was looking at amino acids in the halite, and amazingly, there is some. This is really hard to do, as you can imagine, because these are like several milligram-sized samples. It's really difficult to maintain this very, very clean. I can go into detail about this if you want to hear about it later on. This is published this year in Science Advances. But Queenie was able to pull out an amazing variety of organics trapped in the halite, and also some amino acids as well. The purple spots here are quantities of amino acids. The black and white spots are the same amino acids in the host meteorite. And so there's a background of amino acids just in the ordinary chondrite, and then there's slightly elevated amounts of some amino acids in the halite, which suggests that these are indigenous to the water that deposited the halite. It's amazing to think these could have survived after being irradiated for 4.5 billion years. It's really amazing. So these are hardy guys, apparently. So where do these come from? It's fun to talk about Ceres because you have mission circling that right now. So we've suggested these could be from Ceres, and actually, there's actually a way of. It turns out one of the possible host asteroids for the H-chondrites crosses the orbit of Ceres, and so it's possible to get material from Ceres, if you have volcanism in Ceres, to the parent body of which is called Hebe for the H-chondrites. It's possible to do that. That's one possibility. Maybe something else is the case, though. This is associated in the same meteorite. This is a meteorite called Zag. This is one of the two meteorites with the halite, are these class of carbonaceous chondrites. And these are essentially mineralogically identical to the grains we see in the halite. And this is a polished section of a piece of this one clast here. This is about the size of your fingernail. It's pretty big, actually. It's a lot there. It's mostly phyllosilicates. The white guys here, this is a BSC image, so the white things here are magnetites and pyrrhotite and pentlandite grains. There's no metal. This is a really big carbonate, big enough to actually do chronology on. And the dark areas here are grains of organics sitting in this, which is pretty cool. Let's see, yeah. This is an oxygen isotope diagram of several kinds of meteorites. This is a terrestrial fractionation line. The CI chondrites, which are mineralogically very similar to this class, are here. This class is up here. So it's not from a CI chondrite, it's from something else. There's halite in this class. So definitely this class definitely was entrained with the halite. It was tossed out of whatever world had this ocean, if you will. And these are magnetites here, by the way, and phyllosilicates. This is the halite right here. The carbonate, this is really huge. It's easily big enough to do chronology on. So this will tell us the timing of the alteration. That's happening hopefully very soon at the University of Hawaii. And these are beginning to do analyses of some of the organic grains in this one sample of the clast. Just to let you know, we're doing this by FTIR and Raman and also carbonzanes, and it's pretty cool. The results of this will be published hopefully very soon in Nature Astronomy. It's almost in press. And this just shows you, this is a fib sample of one of these organic grains. This is actually an organic nanoglobule. It was cut in half by polishing, and it's got a really wide range of organics just going from place to place in this one organic nanoglobule. This is work done by Yoko Kibokawa and her collaborators in Japan. Hopefully published very soon, as I said, in Nature Astronomy. This is another really cool, so this is organic rich grain. This is a phyllosilicates. This is a fib slice out of the same class. So the organics here are dark. There are sulfides and magnetite and phyllosilicates enclosed within the organic. These are maps showing different isotopes. This was done by Moto Ito and Yoko. So here's a map showing abundances of heavy nitrogen, and there are hot spots of heavy nitrogen which correlate with hot spots of heavy hydrogen, deuterium, which is unusual. Usually in these meteorites you'll see concentrations of deuterium one place and concentrations of heavy nitrogen somewhere else. It's unusual to have them in the same areas. So that implies someplace very cold formation location, because these are neutron-rich isotopes. You also see, this is a map showing the carbon, just to verify that these are really being found in the carbonate materials. And this is this sort of a SCI image, BSC image of the slice. So this is just one of these organic grains from the ZAG associated with the halite. This is a sample of organics from this water-rich world. And it's in the high abundances of the heavy nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, and also hydrogen suggest a very cold formation location. Okay, this is for the meteorite people in the audience. Lately, people have been plotting up oxygen. This is a measure. This is big delta 17, a measure of oxygen isotopes. This is basically a measure of how different the isotopes are from terrestrial oxygen. That's all I'll say. And down here, it's fun to plot these against all kinds of other things. This case is being plotted against a heavy isotope of chrome. You see the same thing for molybdenum, nitrogen, other heavy neutron-rich isotopes. When you do this sort of plot, what you find is that unexpectedly, all the meteorites plot over here in one area, but all the carbonaceous chondrites plot over here. And this guy's dying here, but and there's a lot of cool things coming out of this diagram, which I won't go into. But there's a gap between the carbonaceous chondrites and almost all the other kinds of meteorites, which is unexpected. And there are ways of explaining this, which I haven't got much time to go into. And there are a few meteorites that actually bridge this gap, but for the most part, this is a pretty good deal. So it suggests that the C chondrites formed maybe further out in the nebula, in the forming evolving solar system, than all the other asteroid parent bodies, which is queer. Why there isn't a gradation is a little bit strange. And the one way to explain it is that Jupiter was here, and that Jupiter was basically borrowing some material from moving back one way or the other. This is like a half-hour talk I could give about this. That's one current idea. So if that's true, then it means it suggests that the C chondrites derive from objects that formed actually beyond Jupiter and were brought in maybe during giant planet migration. That's the idea. And that's shown here. I'll just go this real quick. Just go through this. Well, here's what this ZAG class plots. It's extremely unusual composition. So it's even more extreme than Orgay, with the most water organic rich meteorite we have, perhaps. This class is even more extreme. And there are actually several others up here as well, which I haven't got time to talk about. And there's actually more coming. These classes are actually found in all kinds of meteorites. Here are a similar class found in a meteorite called Scuba, another H chondrite, which was found, fell about 20 years ago, and it needs to have more attention. But basically, it seems to be identical to the class in ZAG. Here's a class I bought on eBay, right? This is a Northwest African meteorite, A369, another H5. Here's the class here. It's pretty big. We do all kinds of things on this one. So these classes are actually fairly abundant in ordinary chondrites. They've just been kind of ignored. So here are potentially samples from these ocean worlds just sitting on eBay waiting to be bought by you guys. This is one that this is cool. This is one that fell in Peru in 2007. It made a smelly, sickening crater. And so this meteorite fell. People walked over to the crater and got sick. And so when we first heard about this, they told us, oh, it's from space-borne virus. And there was all kinds of cool internet stuff about this. And we thought, this can't be a meteorite. Meteorites make people sick. Well, it was. What happened was there was a water table very close to the surface which was enriched in arsenic. And people walking around the crater were smelling arsenic coming out of the lake and getting sick. So it really was a meteorite near Lake Titicaca, and the meteorite's called Caracas. And here's a class in this meteorite, almost done, which is basically the same thing. And this is cool. Here's lots of organic grains here. Queenie Shan was looking at one and found a vein of organics, which I've never seen before in a meteorite. So my point here is that these samples are fairly abundant. They're very small, and analyses are really just getting going on these. And there are things, for instance, there are even similar things in the HED meteorites. If you know HED meteorites, there are large, these are meteorites probably from the asteroid Vesta, which is a basaltic asteroid. It's an igneous evolved asteroid. And there are a class of sea chondrites in here. This is a regolith breccia again. And the big class are always the same things. They're CM chondrites. But the small guys like this are a combination of CM chondrites and this. And this is basically identical to these class we're seeing. So these things are actually fairly abundant in the regoliths of all kinds of asteroids available for study. And I think we have preserved aqueous fluids from the outer solar system, possibly from TNOs. We don't know. It depends on your current model and what you believe. But they're definitely from someplace in the outer solar system because they're from a very cold world. These fluids are accompanied by solids from the parent body. So we have a preserved water rock assemblage from this world, wherever it was. Our idea is that, I can't spell is that they're from what are now P and D class asteroids, but they've been moved around. They probably formed further out than the giant planets and were brought in during giant planet migration, if you believe that happened. And then we're going to try to date the carbonates in one of these class to get timing on when this alteration occurred. It should be very, very early. We'll find out very soon. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. Time for some questions. Except Bill McKinnon at the back. We didn't give
not Bill McKinnon, sorry.
Twice.
Anybody else?
Firstly, Mike, I want to compliment you. This is incredible stuff.
Well, I had a lot of co-authors, so it's easy to do incredible stuff when you have 27 co-authors.
A very quick question. These particular meteorites, were they assembled 4.5 or are they much younger? I mean, when you say they're regolith samples.
We're not really sure. So another way of looking at that is there are actually melt grains, impact melt samples in these same meteorites. We're going to try to date those too to find that out.
Okay.
So we're not sure when they were assembled, but obviously the halite was added after. These meteorites were all metamorphosed. These meteorites were obviously added after that had happened because they haven't been heated at all. So we don't know when they were assembled. Probably it's pretty early.
Okay.
We don't know for sure. Hopefully we're going to find out the next year or so.
My question is related. I'm trying to picture the solar system sequence of formation. So if larger rocky planets require some evolution to differentiate and so forth, but these go back to 4.5 billion years, and yet you have time to make an ocean world and then destroy it. I don't quite understand how that all fits in the available time. I just don't know enough about the planetary.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. For example, we had samples from a known comet, VIL-2, returned just a mile away in our lab, all right? And those contain metamorphosed samples. There are unmetamorphosed stuff, and there's also metamorphosed stuff mixed together, which means that comet probably is a second-generation comet. Material formed, some metamorphosed, they broke up, and reaccreted into the comets we now have. So a lot was happening early on. That's exactly right. And quickly, too, right. That's right, yeah. And things moving around a lot, too.
Hi there. Nice to see that this has come so far because I've been waiting for these results for a long time.
Oh, so have I.
So just an update on the Ceres situation. I don't think this is incompatible with what we're seeing now from Ceres. It doesn't look like it probably formed an entire ocean by itself. I would say if you've not looked at Brian Travis's most recent work and his work also with Phil Bland, where they're talking about convecting.
Phil Bland,
Yeah, whatever. But so they've got this convecting mud mud ball idea, which I think actually very well matches the data and does a good job of matching carbonaceous chondrite data. But what we're also seeing from a geophysical perspective is that the outer shell is maybe 30 to 40% water ice by volume, and has been probably differentiated because there's carbonates and organic material distributed across the surface. There's also intimate ice rock mixtures all over the place, causing a whole different shift in how landforms evolve. And so I don't think I think it actually matches really well with the data you're showing. It doesn't look like these are probably explosive cryovolcanism the way people probably imagine, but there's lots of carbonate alteration happening in the middle of large impact basins, probably from melt. So I think this has been going on Ceres for a really long time. So it's exciting to see that. And I just wondered if you had thought about whether that kind of differentiation process where you still have silts and salts embedded or not falling out of the water would actually match the data pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one reason why I want to date the carbonates in these, to find out if these are really, really old carbonates or somewhat younger, which would be more consistent with Phil's model, perhaps. And so we'll see. Hopefully, the problem is making the standards to do the dating, and they're trying to do that right now. So hopefully this will happen soon. We'll find out. Yeah, I've told Phil that I've told you Phil for years he was wrong. Maybe he's right.
I think he's right.
Yeah, we'll see.